Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative take about the world around me. So in this particular episode, I'm going to focus in on Route 66. I'm going to give my thoughts, and then of course the facts of the matter about Route 66. And so this links to the aspect of my appreciation for traveling, and that sparked my attention specifically when, and I'll go into my thoughts about this when I watched the series Gold Trekker. And so it was a particular episode that focused in on Route 66. They not only focused on I'm sure it's different, different aspects come to mind when, depending on who you ask about Route 66, or if they know what that is, or, whoever you ask. But instead of focusing in on the California routes of Route 66, or the end aspect of Route 66, they went into details at the starting point, which goes to the Midwest and all of these things. All right, so here we go. Let's buckle up and take a ride. Okay, let me just focus in on my opinions. Well, that's a phrase of mine to say, let me just say. But I'm going to start out with my opinions, and then the rest of this episode will focus in on the facts. And I think that's a good mix to center around thoughts of instead of just starting out with the straight facts of everything. All right, so let me jump into my thoughts. Okay, so growing up, and this expanded on to my concepts of what I thought about travel and to my adulthood. So, to make a long story short, it was more emphasized in my adulthood, the importance of traveling outside of just staying in one place. And I think that goes into the philosophy of when you travel, or you think and you understand different concepts, different concerns, different cultures, different meanings behind cultures, all of that wrapped up into one. It gives, and forgive me, my daughter, she likes to mimic. She's talking in the background if you hear her. She's so sweet. But, Katie, stop.
I'm trying to copy you because I wish I was already grown up. Mommy, but I want to make a podcast.
Baby girl, not right now. Okay, let me finish, okay?
Okay, then can you make another podcast? Can I be in it?
Baby, no, not right now. I'm sorry, you guys. She just gets excited and podcast, Mommy, please, podcast and stuff. I'm not trying to be that person to encompass my family all into my stuff. I think that's a separate thing. And then, if they just happen to be in the podcast or something, or do one thing that focuses in on them, that's a good thing. So anyway, getting back to what I was saying about travel, it helps you think more critically, I think, and gives you a deeper understanding about culture. And so this really swept into my understanding when I would watch different travel shows. And then when I met my husband, he just verified the aspects of travel. Well, he for his purpose would travel to serve the country. That's a whole different concept and aspect of that's doing your civil and serving your duties, and that ties into being more appreciative and being more mature about the aspect of travel. But watching travel channels, and specifically with Gold Trekkers, it gave me the perspective about how it's important to understand the history, but also understand how travel can broaden your understanding about the history of where you're going or where you're traveling. So it takes you to the next step in the experience of being there firsthand about these cities, countries, and so forth. And so when I saw, late teens, early 20s, this one particular episode about Route 66, I really enjoyed it because it broke down the concept of the meaning of of how widespan the Route 66 goes on to. It wasn't just a thing that centered around California. It was a massive project, and it was a massive project, and it was a massive thing that to influence the experience of American travel. And also within that, the concept of advertising travel, and then leading up to the concept of travel guides and all of these things. Not thinking about it, but leading to the next step is the roots of, pun intended, Route 66. So, and then expanding out more, about the concept of gas stations, that started being a prevalent thing that was necessary, and started that started the influence and of the concept of having expanding onto it, having diners, truck stops, and then having gas. And then also the concept, when you think about it, of when the early stages of gas stations, having a person there with something like a concierge at a hotel, giving that full service of taking care of your gas, and then being yeah, that's right, but being giving quality service, and giving that nice touch of reaching out to being friendly and just being just that hometown kind of mentality that you get. And so with that said, I'm going to jump into the facts about Route 66. All right, here we go. Yes, sweet. All right, so of course this source will be linked for you in this episode. So this is entitled The History of Route 66, and it was published on August 31st of 2021. So, origins of Route 66. U.S. Highway 66 was created in 1926 and better known as Route 66 or the Mother Road. It became one of the most culturally influenced roads in the United States. Main Street for many small communities that had never been connected by a highway to a wider nation. Route 66 was built on centuries of travel following Native American and Spanish trails. Then the iron and steel groves of railroad tracks as they cut across the American landscape, passing through the major bourgeonings of the North American continent, starting in Chicago. And again, so going back to Globe Trekkers, so she was really good, the host and the traveler that was assigned to talk about Route 66. So she went into the aspects, which, of course, the writers and the producers, they went into the aspect of not only centering around the California aspect of what is typically, I guess you can say, that stereotypical vision of what you would think about Route 66. They actually went to how the route started from, and as we'll get into, Chicago. So Chicago, and heading south into the outwash and moorland country of the Midwest. It passed through the delightfully and youthfully described licorice-colored fertile valleys, Prairie 66. From there, it forged through the vast, blowing wide open spaces of the Great Plains, beginning in Oklahoma and stretching through the Llano Estacado of New Mexico. So Plain 66. Still heading westward, it entered the high ridge and plateaus of central and western New Mexico, over the Continental Divide and across Arizona to Colorado River. Mountain 66 is its label. It braved the vast Mojave Desert and high plains and the San Gabriel Valley leading to the Los Angeles Basin. So this is entitled Desert 66. Finally, it reached to luscious California coast where Route 66 ends or begins. This is the coastal 66, which makes sense because, California is of the coast, so duly noted, duly titled. So Route 66 was a road that introduced diversity in American culture by bringing people and their cultures together. These meetings were not always well received on both sides. So it goes on to say that Native Americans, Hispanics, and African Americans are often overlooked and have poorer experiences than most Anglo-Americans. So it goes on to say during its lifetime and for years later, not four as the number four as it four, F-O-R, years later, for something, for going on that years later, Route 66 represented the ideas of America, the freedom of the open road, to choose one's own path, to see something new and interesting during a trip. It was essential to commerce during its lifespan, allowing shipping and travel from Chicago, Illinois to Santa Monica, California, or vice versa. Even after its decommissioning, it remains a powerful cultural symbol. So Route 66 would follow many ancient trails that had been created centuries prior. Its foundation was built on Native American trails used for hunting animals or trading with neighboring tribes such as the Mojave Trail across California. When the Spanish came to the Southwest, they built their roads along these older pathways, such as the Camino Real de Tierra Atrino, the rural highway from Mexico City up to the northernmost reach of New Spain near Santa Fe. In fact, traffic in the Southwest traveled primarily along this north-south axis for the Spanish colonial period until well into the 19th century. So it goes on to say, meanwhile, many pioneer settlers as well as miners, now coal miners or miners, gold miners, things like that, and entrepreneurs traveling to California during the gold rush in 1849. It followed trails westward blazed by trappers, traders, and explorers. Many journeyed down the Fort Smith Wagon Road itself on offshoot of Native American trails leading from the ancient city of Keoka, I believe the pronunciation. For those who know, feel free to fill up the comments in YouTube, email, comment on X, or, of course, Substack. All right, so across the Mississippi River near modern-day St. Louis. From an early period, the corridor of what would become Route 66 serves as means for cultures to meet and exchange ideas and goods existing along established Native American and Spanish and Mexican towns until the arrival of Americans. American expeditions by Emil Whelpley of 1853, Edward Beale of 1857, blazed new trails from Arizona to the Colorado River on the border with California, following closely along the 35th parallel. Whelpley conducted the Pacific Railroad service, searching for a best paths for future railroads, while Bale's Road soon became a well-traveled wagon trail for immigrants to California. These new trails began to change the traditional axis of travel and the Southwest from east to west instead of south to north, shining steel railroad tracks which soon followed the path. So the railroads altered the landscapes for what would become Route 66 corridor. So Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy roads carried passengers from Chicago to Central and Illinois, where the Gulf, Mobile, and Ohio roads headed south towards St. Louis from there. So the Elgin, Joliet, and Eastern roads headed to Bloomington, Illinois, and the Gulf, Mobile, and Ohio, Springfield, Missouri, where Illinois Central Railroad followed along the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy lines. All right, so going on, says, likewise, many towns important as stops along Route 66 first developed a railroad town, including Bloomington, Springfield, St. Louis, Oklahoma City, Amarillo, Albuquerque, and Kingman, just to name some. So the railroad created a need for restaurants, hotels, repair shops, and growing business districts that created to railroad travelers. And see, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about how, the governmental effort and and this goes on to the business effort, entrepreneurial effort, and the great benefit of, a free market system to find the need of an opportunity, a niche, and then to use that niche to not alone, be of service to these travelers, but come up with business strategies and to become a lucrative business out of it and give new ideas and spawn new ideas, not only, to benefit monetarily, but also to benefit as far as innovation and the development of culture and the American culture. And, outward, this can apply to other cultures and not only Western society, but other, European, Asian, and so forth, with that notion about that. But, that's, of course, different cultural philosophies that go into the idea of the entrepreneurial spirit. So, that goes without saying how you also respect that's not easily bred by having that entrepreneurial spirit in other countries. So that's the beauty and the beacon, I think, that people need to understand and take note and to respect and to treasure, that, good or bad, but good or bad, at the heart of the matter with America, and specifically with the notion of the spirit and the mentality that there's no restrictions as far as the opportunities that you can have from a business point of view and in innovations with business. All right. So, but the let's see, where am I? Okay, I said that. So the Cherokee, Navajo, Pueblo, Hopi, and many other people had experienced disruptions of the culture and communities during their displacement in Indian country and West. So by 1921, 2,804 and 808. Let me say that again. 2,084, 853. I don't know why I'm getting. So again, that's 284,853 were listed by the census as living in the United States, and only in 1924 had all Native Americans been confirmed as American citizens. So, in a country of 160 million people, most had never met a Native American face to face. The railroad had changed that as they cut through Native American lands and right up by their reservations and towns in some cases. So the arrival of the railroad brought opportunity to Native Americans, but also intrusions. And then, it's one of those things where, yes, about that being in the you gotta see it from both ways, but also see the aspect of how this brought the introduction of understanding other cultures, and then also with that being said, going into the future and going into the era in which we live in today, to understand. I think it's important to understand history and look back on it, but not entirely reflect on it and use that as a means to excuse to say that these are still the plights that we have today when we see all of the progress that we have with race relations, and specifically with Native American aspects. And then that's one of those things that you got to look at it for what it is too. With you can't see that again with everything being a victimhood. You got to also be, step back and see things for that. These are savvy people, and you gotta see for the Native Americans who are of sound mind and who are over the age of 21 or 21 that they can think for themselves, and then when out of the mistakes, learning from the mistakes and not seeing as they're just victims of their circumstances. And it's like, I don't know. But that's something to keep in mind. So, all right, so it goes on to say that food service companies like Fred Harvey Company sold the West as a place to experience the disappearing Native American and Spanish culture. These images often reflected the unauthentic Hollywood views of Native Americans and Hispanics that were the only way many Anglo-American travelers had ever encountered them. Native Americans were portrayed as always wearing feathered headdresses or plains. Indians, Hispanics were also portrayed as part of Old Spanish culture with its Moorish castles and flamingo dancing. This obscured the real lives and history of Native Americans and Hispanics. And so they go on to say about the hardships, but that's things for different point of views. But let's go on to say here what this interpretation is saying. So the main benefit to Native Americans was the railroads as created as tourist markets for Native Americans and the arts and goods or jobs paid by Fred Harvey Company to be a stop on one of its Indian tours at a time when 75% unemployed was a common circumstance for Native settlers. So this marketing of the authentic Native American was a running theme for later Route 66 attractions and advertisements. In comparison, the railroads traveling across the continent by 1900 by automobile was very difficult, as the needed support system of gas stations and repair garages did not exist. As the 19th century ended, however, American road building was transformed by mass either bicycling, the Good Roads movement, and rural-free mail deliveries. So by 1910, U.S. citizens began to demand the expansion and improvement of existing roads and the creation of transcontinental highways. And see, that's again that intuitive spirit. When there's a need, go on that and have a service for that need. And by 1910, I said that existing roads and the creations of transcontinental highways. As more drivers took to the road, more pressure was placed on the federal government to build new and better roads. So by 1916, Congress passed the Federal Aid Road. The Federal Aid Road Act, or the Shackelford Bill, to plan and fund a national highway system. Early highways were created from previously existing roadways, which often were not well planned. So travelers frequently had to take long loops and detours to their destinations rather than a straight set path. Sometimes early roads even bent to accommodate local communities, such as mining towns in Arizona or northeast Oklahoma. These old roads tended to be of poor quality, poorly graded, usually not paved, and prone to wheel rust and potholes. The many private roads created over the years had left a dizzying confusion of unmarked roads. These were finally organized after a National Highway Sign System was enacted by Federal Highway Act of 1921, which, with the Post Office Appropriations Act of 1922, provided multi-year funding for improvements to existing highways and roads. So by the time 1926 hit, the U.S. Bureau of Public Roads created the first federal highway system that would lead to U.S. Highway 66. So among other things, this established the numerical system for interstate highways. Very interesting. So highway traveling primarily east-west would be even numbered, while highways traveling primarily northwest would have odd numbers. Early use of Route 66. So American car ownership had grown extraordinarily rapidly in the 20th century. So by the time 1905 came into play, Americans had owned around 78,000 automobiles. Wow, okay. By the late 1920s, that number had risen to over 23 million cars. In 1927, Henry Ford created a cheap and accessible, of course, the Model T, accessible vehicle with a gear and clutch pedals, and a Model A. And then following the Model A in 1908, you got the Model T. This allowed many more new drivers to take to the highways. As motorists increased, service industries shifted focus from the railroads to automobile travelers, resulting in more service stations and auto camps springing up along new highways. So, in the first decades of the 20th century, railroad use was rapidly overtaken by travelers using personal vehicles. So, with better roads and cheaper automobiles, workers would commute to cities for their jobs, providing new opportunities. The automobile gave people a sense of freedom, the ability to travel unrestrained by a fixed rail, and the ability to schedule or stop whenever they wanted. So, others thought the new economic freedom and opportunity to the West Coast, or simply enjoy the newfound connection of important services such as hospitals in larger towns. More and better quality highways were increasingly necessary, which led directly to the creation of the U.S. Highway 66. So, okay. And so I'm going to go on to the 30s and 40s, and then I'm going to end on the aspect of let me go back to the aspect of what is the more updated version of about Route 66 here. So I'm going to go into the aspect of the literature aspect of discussion of Route 66. So, critical questions is the disidentification of Route 66. It is in fact that there are sometimes no signs declaring a road or street as part of the old highway on town streets and country roads. Thus, a section of Route 66 might just be main streets for locals who casually shop and go to the gym, but simultaneously a prized destination for travelers from Brazil, Switzerland, and Germany. Many residents along Route 66 don't associate their main street as part of the legendary highway, and thus local libraries and museums often fail to cross-reference Route 66 with their town's fare. The Texas State Library, for example, had no separate listing for Route 66. Hold on, sweetheart. Or U.S. Highway 66, except among the vast Texas road collections, difficult to easily locate, with 32 boxes to sort through. So, here we go with this. Get this for you right quick. Bum, bum, bum. So, what are you doing, sweetie? Says, don't do that, okay? Okay. So, other works that focus on nostalgia, the view of primarily middle class, and of course they have to use whites that's a derogatory way, but they shouldn't really do that because, it's one of those needless to say things. It's not, it's one of those things where you're looking for racism, or are you actually seeing things for what it is? And so, you see the progress of America understand that if you just see your whole identity as your race, then that's a sad life. And so, escape all of that. So, all right, so recalling road trips have also neglected the voices and experience of minorities. Here we go again with this. So only since 2015 have target studies began to emerge on the experience of African Americans, Hispanics, and Native Americans. So it goes on to say, but research into minority travel and experience along Route 66 is still minimal. For example, research of the Asian American presence along Route 66 and their travel along it include camps during World War II, and it has only just begun. So with this aspect, that's faulty because you're only, again, centering around one specific thing that happened in history. Why don't you ask people of today and people, going back to, if you want to play that game with going back to the history, see or find footage of in the 90s and the 80s and 70s or so about the aspect of minorities, specifically, focusing in on Asians and then going in with Hispanic, African American, and of course Native Americans, and see footage about that or people being interviewed about that, about their experience of Route 66 or their culinary aspect of what they think about of travel of Route 66. That's far better cry than, only focusing in on one, horrible thing that happened in history. And, and then correlate to that today and go out and ask interviews and surveys too about that, of what, go in on and ask, Asians, different minorities, what do they think about Route 66? What is that? Do they know about Route 66 or even heard of it? And if they haven't, then educate them. And then that could spark an interest. That's something to think about, too. No, not yet, baby. So it goes on to say that Route 66 is not a park. It's a living, breathing community of roads. It's not fixed in amber. It's the tension between roads and imagining, and it's, of sparking imaginations. I guess that's what they're trying to say. And its physical reality changes through documenting and referencing 66. So let me touch on what they were saying in the Depression, because that was a pivotal time in history, which also tested the mentality and the mores of the American spirit at that time. So let me find that for you all. So it says Route 66 and the Depression. And in the 1930s and into the early 1940s, the Great Depression displaced hundreds of thousands of Americans. Route 66 became the road that estimated of 210,000 Okies and Arkies traveled down to escape the ruins of the Dust Bowl. Entire families traveled Route 66, desperate for work and jobs in California or the Midwest. So it goes on to say, as a notable American novelist, John Steinbeck famously created a fictional Okie family, the Jodes, who traveled along 66 in the book The Grapes of Wrath. There he gave Route 66 one of its most famous quotes, the Mother Road. But by the mid-20th century, many hopeful travelers found the tales of the land and jobs on the West Coast to be only legends. So from 33 to 38, Roosevelt's New Deal and its Civilization Conservation Corp, or the CCC for short, projects provided desperately needed jobs for employing many of the expansion and improvements of highways, including Route 66. The National Industrial Recovery Act of 1933, for example, provided $6 million of road construction in New Mexico, allowing the state to improve and finally pave all the sections of Route 66 by 1937. So it goes on to say many dangerous segments and looping detours of Route 66 were realigned by the CCC workers to create a more direct east-west route. So examples include the sections from Springfield to East St. Louis and Missouri of 30, and El Reno to Bridgeport of Oklahoma in 33, or Santa Rosa to Albuquerque, realigning in New Mexico of 37. So I'm going to end on this note. Sweetheart, don't do that, baby.
I do my color.
Yeah, that's not I'm sorry, my baby, my youngest child. Thanks, it's coloring time. So I'm going to end on this note. So, again, it's important to look toward history and to see it for what it is, and just to see it to be very objective about your point of view about it. And so you can really get to the Piper, I said no, baby girl. So you can see things for what it is and broaden your take about things in history and correlate that to pave the way, pun intended, for today. All right, so this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. And, of course, questions, comments, concerns, and feedback is greatly important. So feel free to reach out to me either through email, of course, YouTube, fill up those comments, X, and, of course, Substack would be greatly appreciated. This was the Harboring Light, and this reaches the end of Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care out there. Bye-bye for now.